Okay. Good evening to all. Let me welcome you to the CMA Sri Lanka webinar on embedding priority UN SDGs in corporate strategy. So today, let me welcome our keynote speaker, Dr. Ravi Fernando. Then we have our Vice President, Mr. Hennayaka Bandara. We have our council members. Then, of course, let me also welcome all our members and the other invitees. We have two special people we have invited. I think already we have Dr. Nuan with us, and we will, Dr. Nuan is there. Then we also have invited a special so that they will be, and also we have Mr. Jampati Molligoda, chairman of the Sri Lanka Tea Board, is also someone who's closely involved with our sustainability. So he's also there, and I think we will also have one more person who will join us. So just to tell something on the sustainability development goals, it was in 2019 that we conducted the Sustainability Development Goals Agenda 2030. That was our national conference. So at that one where we discussed, and it was a 2-day conference that we had, and now this is, we have been continuing that throughout, and today we are having this special seminar, and I must thank Dr. Ravi Fernando for agreeing to come and speak to us on this very, very important topic. Now, all of you know what CMA is, but let me just say that the Institute of Certified Management Accountants is the national professional management accounting body in Sri Lanka, incorporated by Act of Parliament number 23 of 2009. So we have really a responsibility to the society and also to the public as a national body, and is something that as far as we are concerned, we have to educate the students, and now we are doing the continuing professional development for our members. Now that's something that is very important, and also as a member of the International Federation of Accountants, we have to ensure that all our members are up to date in their knowledge. So today we are doing this, conducting this UN SDGs, and it's also relating to the corporate sector. So where Dr. Ravi will all speak on the corporate strategy, I know that if you know that there are 17 sustainability development goals. Now this is what we really discussed at our conference, national conference in 2019, but today he will be taking 5 priority UN SDGs, so which will be relating to the corporate sector. Now that's the most important thing, because the corporate sector is the private sector of Sri Lanka, and most of our members are working in these organizations, and I'm sure that they will make use of it. And I also just want to bring to your focus that as a professional body, all of us who are working are doing this on a voluntary basis. In fact, I must thank Dr. Ravi, because he also has made his time available. And we are also not, with the problems that we have encountered with the COVID-19 pandemic, digitalization has been one of the main modes by which we have been corresponding and conducting various programs without any interruption. So the continuing professional development programs have been going uninterrupted, and we have even done much more than what we were doing earlier. So this is, I think, very, very good media which we can take forward, and it is not only restricted to local maybe speakers and participants, also to our foreign friends who are here. I'm sure there are many who are attending from the SAFA countries, and I think Mr. Hennayaka should be happy as the Vice President of SAFA that we are having members from SAFA countries. So this is a very important area, and if you also know that with the development launch of the UN SDGs or the Sustainability Development Goals in 2015, almost 190 countries have accepted this, and Sri Lanka is also one. But the most important thing is that we have to achieve this by 2030. Now, that is the big question. Now, I just went through now, even the government, the current president, in his political manifesto, he has highlighted the importance of the sustainability development goals, especially for poverty alleviation, for improving the education. So many of the other areas that are mentioned there. So it is our duty to see that we give prime importance to this and take forward the Sustainability Development Goals agenda, which will be beneficial to all citizens of this country. So in our area, now other area, education is of prime importance. We need to spread this not only in the main cities, but also to the rural sector, and also do that, plus also the employment. Now, I would like all our members who are here now and others that they also remember that they have attended a workshop or a seminar conducted by the Institute of Certified Management Accountants, or CMA. Because I am telling you this because you are aware, but your human resource managers are not aware. You see, you have to also inform them, because sometimes when they even put advertisements, they are really not aware that there's another national body called the Certified Management Accountants. So in fact, we are ashamed because we have members in those institutions and we are wondering as to what they are doing. So I think, as I told you, there is a duty on everyone to ensure that we are helping everyone, we are doing it on a voluntary basis, that you also do the same thing for us. Because that is what we are expecting, not only for you to learn from us, get educated, make your knowledge updated, but also to help us. So I think that's a very good thing, because we are giving all these free of charge. No, we are not charging a single cent. Our conference also will be held on the 27th, 28th, and 29th of September, all free of charge. No expenses, because you can say that CMA is giving this free of charge, and all the people who are participating, the speakers and others, are giving voluntary service. So I think there is also from your part to do that, and I thought that I should say that, because as a professional body, not only have to maintain the highest integrity, but we also have to be of service to the society. That's one prime motive. So I will now invite, before inviting, I will like to introduce, because Dr. Ravi Fernando is someone who is very well known. He is the chairman of the Global Strategic Corporate Sustainability Organization, and also he is with the he is an executive in residence of INSEAD France. Now that is one of the leading management institutions in the world or globally. So we are very, very proud to have Dr. Ravi Fernando with us, and he is one who has received a US copyright for his work at the Cambridge University for the concept of strategic corporate sustainability. Now, we are very happy that someone of that caliber is here with us to address this seminar. Then he published Strategic Corporate Sustainability 7 Imperatives for Sustainable Business. Now, this was based on the work that he did when he was at the Cambridge University. So I'm very, very happy that we have a very, very eminent person who is very, very well versed in the strategic corporate sustainability, and you will be able to really tell us the corporates of this country as to what they need to do, because from our side, we have now provided the opportunity for them to find out what they should implement, and also that they will be able to carry forward this message when they go to their workplace. So may I now invite Dr. Ravi Fernando to address us.
Thank you, Professor Vatavalla, and thank you also for all the dignitaries who are invited today. It is indeed a pleasure for me to share some thoughts today on the UN SDGs. And as Professor Vatavalla very rightly pointed out, we are not going to talk about all 17 today, but I have picked 5 which I believe are priority. And in terms of the subject of prioritization, this can be a debate, and there are probably 17 permutations, and we can discuss which ones are important and which are not. But I will basically address this entire subject from the point of view of why were UNSDGs formulated in the first place? Number 2, how should we be performing in terms of that those UNSDGs in terms of corporates, and also make all of you understand that the basis of the formulation of these UNSDGs go back to 1987, and the first report that basically highlighted that the planets and the nations of the world and businesses of the world are facing a climate emergency. And strangely, I find that the word emergency has been substituted by the word climate change, and people seem to address this topic and look at this issue yet as some natural phenomenon. And I want to reassure all of you, this is not a natural phenomenon. This is basically an unnatural phenomenon we are now facing due to ignoring the science of this subject. So I will talk initially about what is the climate emergency that prompted the formulation of these goals, and then talk about how extreme weather incidents are beginning to impact the planet and businesses, supply chains all over the world. From there, I want to spend a few minutes on why and how I have prioritized these goals. And I want to tell you, I have prioritized them based on the climate emergency and extreme weather. Because if these 2 factors continue, all the great corporate plans and the corporate strategies and the national growth strategies will be invalidated, because they will basically be subject to the vagaries of the climate emergency and extreme weather. And if we don't fix those 2 issues first, then all these strategies will not work. So I will basically then look at the 5 priorities and give you a rationale for each of them. I will also spend some time explaining to all of you how to embed these strategies in your corporate strategies. And I hope that each of you will make a note of this. And when you go back to your companies and to your offices, you will begin to look at these 5 goals very differently and start mobilizing them in your companies. Lastly, I want to talk about the emerging paradigm of 21st century leadership versus 18th century leadership, 19th century leadership, or 20th century leadership, so that every one of you will understand what the mindset of a future leader should be, even as they mobilize these various goals. So let's start at the beginning. Professor Vatavalla already mentioned to you that the UN SDGs, or Sustainable Development Goals, were launched in 2015 December. However, the follow-up to what was known as the Millennium Development Goals, which were launched before that in the year 2000. And I will chronologically take you through some of these major events, and then slowly move on to the topic that I'm going to talk to you about. So one of the things that every one of you should be very familiar with by now, and I find that more and more corporate leaders are beginning to get familiar with this, and lots of national leaders are also getting to be familiar with this. But one thing is to understand what are referred to as the global risks the world is facing, that is going to impact all economies and all businesses and all business strategies. So what are these risk report developed by the World Economic Forum? And I suggest that each of you take some time to read this. And one thing I do appreciate is the fact that none of these subjects are in the curriculums, in the professional curriculums of most of the MBA programs, or for that matter, the professional programs. So it is very, very incumbent upon each of you to get up to speed with these subjects so that you are able to respond and proactively respond to the reality that is hitting our market. So the two major risks that have been identified both in 20 and 21 were, number one, extreme weather incidents, and number two, climate action failure. Number three was human environmental damage. Even this week, we see there's an oil spill that is now in the Mediterranean Ocean. And we also hear of many forest fires, sometimes set off by people. And sometimes, of course, set off due to the droughts that are then absolutely ready to ignite at the drop of a pin. Infectious diseases suddenly have come into the picture. And we all know how the COVID-19 has put paid to a lot of the business strategies that the world is looking at. And there are some sectors which are virtually completely wiped out. And biodiversity loss. And as I'm not going to be talking about all these other factors, I want to spend a minute or two just explaining some of those issues. So let's start from the fifth one. Biodiversity loss is the loss of the natural habitat and the environment. And let me give you a statistic. The world has basically destroyed, in the name of development, about 70 to 75% of all the forest cover in the world. And I hope all of you understand that when we destroy forest cover, we are affecting three things. Number one, we are affecting the rain cycle. We are affecting our oxygen availability because the trees are a supplier of that. And number three, most of the toxins that biodiversity absorbs, we now as human beings end up absorbing that. And that's not a good thing. And lots of the pandemics are also beginning to start by the destruction of biodiversity, because that then leads to the bats and whatever animals you have being caught into wet markets, and in the wet markets, through as they are slaughtered for consumption, through the blood of those animals, then they come into contact with human beings, and therefore we end up with a crisis. So biodiversity loss is a crucial area that also impacts the infectious diseases above that. Human environmental damage. So there are many companies who yet continue with fossil fuels, and that is the cause of majority of the extreme weather incidents we have. And I will talk to you a little more about it in a minute. And let's now look at extreme weather incidents and climate action failure. So what are extreme weather incidents? There are three kinds of extreme weather incidents that every person experiences. Number one, unprecedented increases in global temperatures. And if one looks at the last 20 years, the last 20 years have been the hottest ever 20 years recorded in the history of mankind. And every one of those years is getting hotter than the year before. And I can tell you that 2021 has already been designated the hottest of those 21 years that we have just passed. And July was recorded as the hottest ever month recorded in the history of the world. So I hope all of you understand the first impact of an extreme weather incident is extreme heat, which then leads to droughts. And when we talk about droughts, we are talking of debilitating droughts that then cause massive impact to agriculture all over the world. And this is now the new norm. And as you and I now know, food security is becoming a major issue in the world. And one of the reasons for that is the extreme weather of drought is beginning to impact a lot of the nations which are in the agro-production area. And this is the direct result of an extreme weather incident. So Sri Lanka, what about Sri Lanka? So 2019 was the hottest ever year recorded in Sri Lanka in 140 years of recording Sri Lanka's temperatures. Now, average temperatures. And 2020 and 2021 were hotter than the year 2019. And I can now confirm 2021 is the hottest year Sri Lanka has ever ended up experiencing. The third kind of issue that we have is then we have extreme temperatures, we have droughts as a result of extreme temperatures, which is basically mopping up all the atmospheric water, and then groundwater too. And then we have unprecedented rainfall and floods, which are attacking every nation. Even as we speak today, if all you have to do is to watch any news bulletin, and you will see flooding is now the new norm in most countries. And even as you watch, you saw Louisiana and a good part of we call it the hurricane belt of USA, pummeled with unbelievable, unprecedented rainfall and flooding and tornadoes. So these are the three issues of extreme weather. So now the question is, why? Why has the planet heated up so much in the last 20 years? How did 2021 become the hottest year recorded? And why do we keep having this heating of the planet? And I can tell you, the answer is very simple and very straightforward. The answer is because nations, businesses, and organizations have continued to burn fossil fuels, which are coal, which are one is coal, one is burning of petroleum, diesel, and natural gas. Please understand, natural gas is a fossil fuel. So now the question is, if burning of fossil fuels is what causes the temperature gain, because the carbon dioxide emitted from burning fossil fuels is trapped in the atmosphere and traps the heat, and this trapping has happened and has been recorded scientifically and identified scientifically almost from 1987, 34 years back. So now everyone needs to be asking the question, how come for the last 35 years, if we have known that burning of fossil fuels is the cause of global warming, the climate emergency, and extreme weather incidents, how come we didn't give it up or start moving rapidly away from this from the time we knew about it? So that is the key question you and I have to ask. Why is it that for 4 years, we have known this simple fact and not exited burning of fossil fuels? Now, with these few words, now the next question is, what do we mean by climate action failure? Whose climate action failure are we talking about? So let me categorically mention the climate action failure is the failure of national leaders, world leaders, business leaders, and you and I failing to understand the cause of the climate crisis, the climate emergency, which is burning of fossil fuels, and not taking action about it rapidly and with urgency. And when I talk of 5 priority goals, my simple criteria is, what can we do to ensure that the global warming due to burning fossil fuels is first addressed? Because if we don't address that, the climate crisis we are facing will become worse and worse, and you will begin to see an unprecedented number of extreme weather incidents pummeling the Earth's economy, pummeling every business strategy, and completely making some of our supply chains irrelevant. And talking of supply chains being irrelevant and getting smashed due to extreme weather, I'm sure all of you know that the world is now experiencing a microchip and supercapacitor shortage. And one of the biggest countries manufacturing microchips in the world is Taiwan. And Taiwan's production was completely disrupted due to droughts that they are facing even at this time. And now we are also talking about global and local food security problems. Because when you have mass agriculture is immediately vulnerable to extreme weather incidents. So with those words of introduction, and the climate action failure is failure on the part of leaders to urgently and react and start taking corrective action by exiting fossil fuels. So with that, let me move on to my next slide. So if any one of you had any doubts that the last 20 years were the hottest on ever ever experience on the planet, we need to ask the question, so what are the examples of this? Right, all of you know that California had one of the worst forest fires in the history of California. Australia had one of the worst ever forest fires. So when you have drought, you will end up with making the soil and the forest ready for forest fires, unless you have had a strategy to manage the drought. So you have forest fires in all these countries. You have debilitating heat waves in Canada, Japan, and India, where the number of people dead I have shown you due to heat waves. You have seen of forest fires in Sweden, Algeria, and even as we talk today, the Siberian forest in Russia is on fire. And Australia had a debilitating forest fire. And I have also put down next to that, the highest ever temperatures recorded in a lot of the Southeast Asian countries are averaging between 39.5 degrees to 47.2 degrees were recorded in the last 2 years. And the Arctic. All of us know we have the North Pole, we have the South Pole, and we have the Mid Pole, which are the Himalaya mountain range. Now, this is known as the freezer unit of the planet. Now, all of you have a freezer unit in your fridges. If the freezer unit is generally kept at 0 degrees centigrade, what if your freezer unit starts hitting 45 degrees centigrade, as was recorded in July this year? The freezer unit of the planet recorded 45 degrees centigrade, which means, now I have given you an image of that. That is what the North Pole looks like even as we watch. So young Greta Thunberg, who is one of the activists about this subject, trying to get world leaders' attention to act on the climate emergency and not simply talk about it, which we have done for 35 years, basically said, our house is on fire. Our house, meaning our planet, is on fire. And the bottom line is, when you look at the world today and just watch the world news, you can confirm California is on fire, the Siberian forest in Russia is on fire, and there are so many other forest fires burning, and literally our house is on fire. So if our house is on fire, what should we be doing? Put the fire out. Bring the fire extinguishers. Bring the fire department. Now, what is the equivalent of bringing the fire department? Is stopping using fossil fuels. That is the simple requirement if we are serious about putting the fire out that we are experiencing in the world today. So let's ask the question, have we known about this problem? When did we get to know about this problem? So in 1987, Our Common Future was a report that was commissioned by the United Nations. And in that report, Brundtland, who was then the Prime Minister of Norway, was given the job to create this report. And she published a report called Our Common Future. And in Our Common Future, it was clearly mentioned that the world needs to exit and come out of fossil fuels if it wants to somehow manage the climate emergency that is going to happen. And everything that you and I are experiencing in 2021 was pretty much cataloged and reported in 1987 in the Brundtland report. And in the Brundtland report, she also mentioned, and that's the first time that the term sustainable development was concocted. And she said, sustainable development is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs. So I can categorically tell you, since the report in 1987, the world's leaders have dramatically compromised the planet through inaction and not exiting fossil fuels. And today we are facing the consequences of that. And we are now hitting a tipping point in terms of global atmosphere. So in 1987, this report came out. Everyone got quite scared when this report came out, because the report categorically mentioned that human activity and decisions made by human beings is the cause of this issue. However, nothing really happened between those years. And then in 1992, there was a big summit called the Rio Earth Summit in Brazil. And what is ironical is Brazil is another country that set off in 2018 over 72,000 forest fires in the name of agricultural development. So Brazil set itself on fire. California has caught fire due to the emergency and the temperature rising. Australia, similar. And the Rio Earth Summit was the first time world leaders once again said, we have to stop this. We have to exit fossil fuels. And then in 1992, they said, by 2000, we must somehow exit fossil fuels. Nothing happened. No leader took any serious decisions to move out of fossil fuels. And then we come to 1997, where they had the Kyoto Protocol in Japan. Once again, there was a lot of discussion and absolutely nothing happened in exiting fossil fuels. Then in 2000, Kofi Annan, who was then the UN Secretary General, launched what was known as the Millennium Development Goals. And his was an attempt to get companies and countries and nations addressing the key issues that were addressed in the 1987 report. We moved forward to the Paris Agreement in 2015, and no less than 26 COP meetings. The 26th meeting is going to happen in Glasgow, as happened between 1987 and 2021. And we are burning more fossil fuels than before. Even in spite of the lockdowns, I can tell you, fossil fuel burning continues unabated. There was a slight blip of a drop of about 5-6%, but the carbon dioxide levels are moving up. And I can tell you that even in the US Congress, the presentation was made by James Henson of NASA in 1988, and told the entire Congress of the United States, we have to exit fossil fuels and we have to start taking action because it's us who are causing the climate emergency, but absolutely nothing happened. So now we move forward. So the real question now is, so what has happened with the Millennium Development Goals? The Millennium Development Goals were launched, as I mentioned earlier. Let me get to that slide. The Millennium Development Goals were launched in the year 2000, and between 2000 and 2015, only 2 out of the 8 Millennium Development Goals were achieved, and almost all of them were achieved because of China's ability to raise people out of poverty. We now come to 2015, 2030, and I think the first 5 years of the UNSDGs and the Paris Agreement have now got exhausted. And let me now give you the bad news that as at December 2020, when the first review was held, the commitments made by nations are 60 to 70% off the mark, off the target, and we are 70% basically behind in what we should have achieved at 2020 as a figure. And when we look at the future, we now have to catch up the 70% we didn't achieve, and basically confirming we have done nothing to exit fossil fuels. And then we have to look at what we have to achieve in the next 9 years, which is to catch up the shortfall and now catch up the 100% that is to be achieved between now and 2030. And I want to tell you, when we met in the Paris Agreement, the decision was we must exit fossil fuels by 2030, and the NDCs, the nationally determined commitments, were targeted to achieve at least 80% through renewable energy sources by 2030. But the world has been very good at kicking the can and passing the buck and changing the dates simply so that everybody can sit back and relax. And now the relaxation is turning into a climate emergency. In 1992, we said we must get this done by 2000. In 2000, we said we'll get it done by 2015. In 2015, we have said we are getting it done by 2030. And if any of you are following the global discussions after the IPCC agreement, IPCC report that just came out, and the World Meteorological confirmation that the world will cross the milestone of plus 1.5 degrees centigrade in 2025, which will then set off an unprecedented amount of disruption to global economies with a 20-foot sea level rise. And this is now as per the WMO report. So the bottom line is we have tried to achieve 8 goals at the beginning, 17 goals in the second round, and we have kicked the can and kept moving the targets from 2000 to 2030. And now the new discussion is, shall we do this by 2050? I can tell you, by 2050, it will be interesting to see who will be around from all the leaders who are ready to postpone achieving the exiting of fossil fuels, because we will not have the planet that you and I currently are living in. We will have a very damaged and a very destroyed planet. Now, I tell you why I am coming up with 5 priority goals for nations and businesses. Because if we don't attack those 5 goals, us doing everything else is not going to stop the climate emergency. And that is the bottom line. Okay? The planet is heating up because we burn fossil fuels. So I'm not in a moment saying the other goals are not important, but I'm saying if we don't attack these 5 goals and achieve them, achieving everything else will not stop the climate emergency we are faced with now. So why do I say that? So now let's look at the bottom line of what has happened. From 1987 to 2021, the amount of gigatons of carbon dioxide as a result of burning fossil fuels went up from 21 gigatons in 1987 to 33.9 gigatons as at today. Now, please understand, if in the last 35 years we had achieved anything that we committed to, we would not see a dramatic increase. We would at the least see a holding pattern. We have not had a holding pattern. We've had a nearly 150% increase. Carbon concentrations in the planet went up from 280 parts per million to 420 parts per million as we watch today. That wouldn't have happened if we had listened to the report in 1987 and started exiting fossil fuels. Our global temperatures from our base year of 1880, which is when the Industrial Revolution began to come forth, we have now hit plus nearly 102 degrees. And we know the figure of 1.5 degrees is now imminent in the last 4 years, as per the World Meteorological Organization, which basically is the one entrusted with understanding what the global temperature rises will be. So this chart confirms that we've had a climate action failure on the part of our world leaders, of our national leaders, and of our business leaders. Now the question is, can we do something with urgency in the next 4 or 5 years to make sure we exit or reduce dramatically the impact of fossil fuels on the business? I want to now switch on to Sri Lanka a bit. I already told you Sri Lanka has experienced the hottest ever temperatures in its history, recorded in the last 140 years in 2019. Now, Sri Lanka, by and large, is a nation that is vulnerable in terms of mass agriculture. Now, here are some of the statistics. Agriculture, as at this point in time, accounts for around 8% of our GDP and 40% of our land. 40% of our land is in agriculture. Agriculture employs about 26% of our entire employable population. So 1 in 4 people is in agriculture. Nearly half the world nation's land is in agriculture, but it only contributes 8% of our GDP. So we can see the contribution is very low compared to the assets we have deployed in this area. So now let me tell you, mass agriculture as we know it is going to be one of those greatly affected by the extreme weather incidents of drought, high temperature, extreme high temperature and flooding, because the number of incidents have increased from about 150 incidents per annum to now nearly 700 incidents per annum. And you don't have to take my word for it. Just go turn on to any global news and watch the what I call the extreme weather report, which you now see. They should retitle this not weather report, the extreme weather report. And you can see they'll be reporting forest fires in California, forest fires in Siberia, flooding in Louisiana. And these incidents, ladies and gentlemen, are going to dramatically increase and put paid to all these grandiose strategies we have for growing our agricultural businesses, because the amount of extreme weather incidents will continuously increase, not decrease, and they will begin to impact every bit of agriculture we have. So suddenly, food security and extreme weather is creating a need. And one option we have is also to look at precision agriculture, which uses 80% less water, and is also in terms of because of the inefficient use of fertilizer and pesticides, which now basically 50% of all the fertilizer and pesticides that we use in agriculture in Sri Lanka and most countries get leached away due to rain, to wind, and that means the impact is only 50%. And that impact, when it gets leached, goes into the waterways, and then we end up with CKDU and all these kidney diseases. So I can tell you that one of the decisions that the government has now begun to move towards is organic fertilizer, which I think in the long term is a strategically good strategy and needs to be, of course, phased in. So agriculture is going to be vulnerable to extreme weather. That's mass agriculture, as agriculture as we knew it. Let's take another figure on Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka, as at today, have destroyed over 84% of our natural forest cover, which leaves us with 16% natural forest cover. Now, if all of you know that without forest cover, you will not have the rain cycle. And a lot of our fresh water is coming from the forests that we have. So if we keep destroying that, that is not going to help us. Now I'm going to move into the priority SDGs, because number one, we have to stop using fossil fuels, coal, petroleum, diesel, and natural gas as the cause of the climate emergency and the cause of extreme weather. So what is the goal we have to focus on to achieve that? Number two, we have to reforest the country. If we are down to 16% of our primary forest cover, that is going to come and hit us from a water perspective, from agriculture perspective in the morning, in the future. So we have to attack the goal that is relevant to exiting fossil fuels. We have to attack the goal that is relevant to reforesting the forests that we have destroyed. Now I have given you answers to two of the goals that I'm going to present to you. So what are these goals? In the presidential manifesto, it is clearly mentioned that Sri Lanka should be moving to 80% renewable energy by 2030, which I know has now been reduced to 70% by 2030. So where are we today in terms of goal number 7? Goal number 7, ladies and gentlemen, is the priority number 1, because if we don't fix that goal, extreme weather will wipe out most global economies, most global supply chains, and most of the agriculture we know. So where are we with this? We are now at about 30% in terms of renewable energy. 28 or 29% of that is coming from hydroelectricity. And hydroelectricity, of course, depends on the rainfall. So please remember, once again, a reason to look at reforesting. And only about 1% is currently generated from solar power. Now the nation needs to aggressively go from 30% to 70% in the next under 9 years. Now, we cannot leave this simply to the government of Sri Lanka. Every single one of you who is in a business must also play a role in helping the government move towards this goal because the country's national leaders alone can't achieve this. We have to be part of the solution. So the first goal that is an absolute priority, because for 35 years we have ignored this. That is why our gigatons of carbon dioxide have increased and our parts per million, our carbon concentration has gone up. So goal number 7 then becomes a priority for business. How do you mobilize goal number 7 in your company? The question you have to ask yourself when you go back to work tomorrow is first find out what is your electricity bill? What is your fuel bill? How much is the company paying on fuel, for generators, for transportation? What is the fuel bill for diesel? What is the bill for electricity? And urgently come up with a strategy for your company to move from whatever percentage of renewable energy you have to move towards 70 to 80% renewable energy driven in the next 9 years. Now you might say, now that is easier said than done. Has any company done that? There are 2 boards I sit on, and in 2017, I insisted that these are the number 1 priority goal we must focus on. And I'm proud to say that in both companies, in the case of one company, we have achieved 130% of our electricity from renewable energy as at today. And in the second company, we are at 78% renewable energy. And by the end of this year, we'll be 100%. So if any of you are wondering whether this is feasible, whether this is possible, I will tell you, not only is it possible, we have done it. And any company that I'm involved in directly or indirectly in Europe, this is the goal we set as the number 1 priority to contribute, to become part of the solution to the climate emergency, not continue to be a part of the pollution and part of the global warming of the planet. And I can tell you that is the first goal every company should be looking at. And, I know lots of Sri Lankan companies have fancy CSR reports, talk of all these wild and wonderful things they're doing. But I can tell you, please stop messing around and start focusing on the climate emergency that is unfolding in front of us every day on the news channels and be a part of the solution by moving to renewable energy. And any company with leadership who are science-based will go after this target with focus, with drive, and with great ambition to at least net off your electricity and move towards renewable energy in terms of the vehicles you drive. It's no point you saying you're going to save the planet and be driving a 4-wheel drive, ladies and gentlemen, driven by fossil fuels like diesel and petrol. I can tell you, I find it quite amusing when people leading businesses are driving fossil fuel driven vehicles and talking about how worried they are about the global climate emergency. You've got to walk the talk, and you need to attack goal 7 as the first goal in terms of the climate. The second and third goals are connected. Goal number 15, I already told you, Sri Lanka has wiped out 84% of forest cover, is life on land, reforesting the land, not cutting down any more trees, making sure we conserve and increase biodiversity, not continue to wipe the biodiversity down. Why have I put goal number 6 next to that? Because if you don't sort the forest covers, you will not have the water cycle. The rainwater cycle is when trees exude oxygen, which links up with the hydrogen in the atmosphere. Then we have H2O. If you cut all the trees down, what is going to give the oxygen away? Right? Buildings don't give oxygen away, trees do. So I see the next 2 goals that every business should be urgently focusing on is A, reforesting, conserving biodiversity, and looking at protecting our water resources, because if there's no water, you will not have health. All of us need, our bodies are 90% water, and if we don't have water, we are not going to survive. So that's why, I put a figure there. This was an announcement in one of the national papers which said, do you know that in the next 5 years, Sri Lanka might face a water crisis? as you can see written there in singular. I have also put down a chart there which highlights all the nations of the world that have unprecedented water crisis. And you can see the Middle East, North Africa, India, Sri Lanka, and even a lot of the American parts. And America is beginning to now experience droughts, and most of the agriculture is beginning to get badly hampered as a result of the water scarcity, as per the map that you are seeing on the screen right now. And you know, I have worked in the Middle East, and of course I've worked in 4 of the continents of the world. But I remember when I was working in the Middle East, in most of the Middle Eastern countries, how many days of rain do you have? Ladies and gentlemen, the answer is between 1 day and 5 days. Why? Do they have any trees left? No, they don't. They have very few. They have basically wiped out their forest covers. So do we want to be like the Middle East by continuously destroying our forest cover? Then every company and every business better become part of the solution, so that you not only reignite the forest covers and stop cutting down the forests, but also contribute to the rain cycle of the country and agriculture of the country. There will be no agriculture if we keep wiping out our water resource through the forest. So 3 of the 5 goals I have already given you as priority goals. And I don't want to mince my words. I'm not saying that these are the only things you have to do. But I'm saying if you don't do these things, the planet will cross the 1.5 degree barrier by 2025. And anyone wanting to achieve any of these goals better put 2025 as your target to achieve them, as we have done in the companies I operate, because doing it after 2025 means you do not really care what happens to the planet. If you're serious about the climate emergency, then address the climate emergency while we have a planet, not after the planet is destroyed. So all these amazing corporate strategies and business strategies that everyone is spending hours and hours discussing, I can tell you will not be worth the paper written on, will not be worth the hours and minutes spent to develop it if your supply chains are going to get wiped out. So now I've given you 3 goals. I'm going to the 4th goal. So who is into renewable energy today? China is already the world leader in wind and solar power. Countries which are sometimes even poorer than Sri Lanka, like Costa Rica, is already in 100% renewables. You can see Uruguay is 95% clean energy, almost there. Denmark is, and most of the Scandinavian countries are already at 100% renewable energy. Even countries like Morocco have the biggest solar parks in the world now. Portugal is at 100%, and the world is moving rapidly. Now the question you and I have to ask is, number 1, is Sri Lanka moving rapidly? I can see the president is very clear what he wants to achieve. But is Sri Lanka's electricity board moving at the right pace to achieve this goal of 70% renewable energy by 2030? And you can answer that question. I don't need to answer that question. So floating solar is now becoming a big success in Japan and in even Singapore. And I can tell you, Sri Lanka has 30,000 water bodies, thanks to the famous Parakrama Bahus. There's enough and more water bodies where we can launch floating solar if we are serious about moving aggressively to renewable energy. And we should be now looking at solar plus battery, wind plus battery. And I'm very happy to see that at least 1 or 2, there are quite a few companies in the renewable energy sector in Sri Lanka, but they need to be encouraged. They need to have policies to support this. They need to be supported by the CEB, not the CEB becoming a roadblock to them achieving what they have to achieve. And if the nation is to achieve 70%, then everybody needs to be running in one direction and moving towards renewable energy as the first and most important goal. And I hope you also understand why I said we need to move towards the next goal. The 4th goal that every nation should be looking at is goal number 12, which is responsible production and consumption. Every company's business model better have consumption and of raw materials, of sourcing and production with renewable energy to be responsible and sustainable. So as you can see, this goal is very crucial for every company's business model. The goals I have picked up today for you as priority goals to attack are to do with the survival of the planet and attacking the climate emergency before 2050. Every business needs to look at their range of products, how they manufacture them, what is their production energy resource, what kind of sourcing do they have, are they contributing to plastic pollution, which is going to last 500 years in the planet? Are they moving towards biodegradability? Are they looking at products and services that are the financial banks and the institutions funding fossil fuels or stopping funding fossil fuels? Because if you fund fossil fuels, you're going to be part of the problem of irresponsible consumption and supporting irresponsible production. So that's the fourth goal. And I have just one more goal to share with you to complete my 5 targets for Sri Lanka. And I can tell you, these 5 goals I like to call the 5 goals that directly impact business strategy and the business model. I'm not saying any of the other goals are less important, but these are about surviving 2025, ladies and gentlemen, and not about looking at trying to do these things in 2040, 2050, and 2060. And that to me is irresponsible leadership when nations and businesses are committing to doing this by 2050, when the World Meteorological Organization have said we are crossing plus 1.5 in 2025. So if you're doing anything to do with the climate emergency, then do it by 2025, like we have done in the 2 companies that I'm driving for this subject. Last goal, innovation. And the comments I have written on the left-hand top of corner of every one of these goals are directly from the President's manifesto in terms of what he had a vision to achieve in terms of energy and in terms of physical resources. And he talks of development of physical resources of the country. Now, innovation is the goal I'm talking about. Industry, innovation, and infrastructure. Sri Lanka, from the year we got independence, have been a nation exporting commodities. If we continue to export commodities in commodity format, we are not going to improve the turnover of the country, the profitability of the country, and the contribution of these sectors. We have to move towards branding. And I can see that when we look at we have Mr. Molligode on our group today, and I can see he's working tirelessly in terms of the organic side, and he's also working tirelessly towards increasing the branded sale contribution of Ceylon tea, which is, I think, at about 10% or 15%. I'm sure he will correct us if I'm wrong. Now, there's another 80% to go. Now, I want to draw your attention to 3 commodities Sri Lanka has, which is graphite, rock phosphate, and titanium. Sri Lanka has the purest graphite on the planet, the purest ilmenite or titanium in the planet at 73.8%, and some of the best rock phosphate which should be used in our fertilizer business. What have we done the last 73 years since independence? We have sold this in gunny bag form in commodity prices, just like we do in most of our commodities. We have to leverage these commodities by bringing in strategy to innovate and increase the whole contribution of these sectors by selling this at not commodity prices, but at value-added prices. And I can tell you, graphite leads to making graphene, and graphite is today one of the primary minerals used in most of the supercapacitors, the batteries of the world, and even in some of the advanced solar panels that are being devised. We are sitting on a gold mine, and we need to innovate and move forward. Now, how do we implement this in a company? Then, goal number 9, if you want to implement goal number 9 in your company and goal number 12, which I talked earlier, you need to completely review your supply chains and refocus them to be sustainable supply chains and not supply chains causing harm to the planet. You need to be innovative and start value addition and increasing the quotient of value-added exports to Sri Lanka and not just commodity exports if Sri Lanka's economy is to thrive. So these are the 5 goals that I want to leave you with. I'm not saying that other goals are not important. The first 2 goals I talked about was goal number 7 and goal number 15 and goal number 6, which are to do with the survival of the planet and the nation beyond 2025. Now, why is this important to Sri Lanka? Because Sri Lanka is recorded as per the Global Vulnerability Index post the climate emergency and the melting of sea level rise as among the top 5 or 6 countries which are vulnerable to the climate emergency, sea level rise, and to climate emergencies like droughts and extreme temperatures. If we are in the top 5, then every one of us should be then stopping everything else and focusing on how do we stop Sri Lanka becoming a victim of the vulnerability, and how to do that. It's these 5 goals I talked to you. So I want to end today by talking to you about what kind of leadership do we need if we want to move from our 34 years of denial, 34 years of inaction, 34 years of knowing we had to exit fossil fuels and not having done so, in fact, burning more fossil fuels now. And basically, I can tell you, one chart has already convinced you that this is the fact out of 34 years, because our gigatons of carbon dioxide due to burning of fossil fuels has gone from 20.1 metric tons to 33.9 metric tons. Our climate concentration of carbon dioxide went from 280 to 420. If we had addressed this issue in the last 34 years, would we have a doubling, near doubling of these figures? No. So what do we then need with urgency in the next 4 to 5 years? What do we need in terms of leadership? I can tell you, the world has unfortunately had 18th century, 19th century, and sometimes 20th century leaders who have not behaved with the planet's interest in mind, are putting planet and people before profit. They have all put profit before planet and people. So what do we need in the 21st century? Number 1, I believe that there will be 4 characteristics of a 21st century leader. And every single one of us needs to move from our 18th, 19th, 20th century thinking to become a 21st century leader. And I'm hoping every student who's listening to this, everyone who is in a corporate who is listening to this, every single one who is a member of CMA who is listening to this, understand that the power to change yourself as a 21st century leader lies in your hands. It's not in the hands of somebody else. So, number 1, you need to have an appreciation of science. You need to respect science. I'm not saying that all of you should now become science degrees and scientists. I'm saying simply appreciate science. Appreciate the fact that if you burn fossil fuels, the planet will warm and we will cross the 1.5 degree centigrade barrier in 2025. That's all the science you need to understand. Understand that. Respect that. Listen to scientists. Take the advice of the doctors. Take the advice of medical profession. Don't ignore the advice of medical profession like some 19th and 18th century leaders did in 3 or 4 countries today. Which are the 4 countries that ignored the medical emergency, ignoring the medical advice of doctors? Number 1 was USA in 2020. Number 2 is Brazil. And number 2 is India. These 3 countries have 650,000, 540,000, and 450,000 deaths, and contributed to the top 3 deaths in terms of coronavirus because its leaders ignored and did not respect science. You don't want to be a leader who is causing death and destruction. You want to be a leader who is part of the solution. And that is the kind of leader we need. So number one, these leaders appreciate science. Number two, these leaders understand that there is no business if there is no planet. They understand there is no business if there is no people. And if that understanding simply will lead them to put planet and people before profit. And I like to call it 2 ESG mindset or triple bottom line mindset. Every single one of you who wants to be a 21st century leader must have a triple bottom line mindset that puts planet and people before profit and not leave the planet worse off that you took it over. Why do I say 2 ESG? I want to tell you something about ESG. What is ESG? Environmental issues, social issues, and governance issues. Why have I called it 2 ESG? Because in that entire configuration, we have missed economic profit. It has to be economic profit. Business models must deliver economic profit in an environmentally sustainable and stewardship way, ensuring social progress. And you must do so with governance. So I call it 2 ESG. And if you have been thinking ESG is the answer, no, 2 ESG is the answer. Because if you don't have economic profit model, you're not going to achieve anything. Number 3, every business that is remotely interested in being 21st century must embed what I call the 21st century business model. And that is a model that we have developed. And now we are teaching this course in Luxembourg, in Ireland, in United Kingdom. And this is the new model that has to be embedded in business strategy and in the board agendas and the management committee agendas and the leadership agendas of the companies. If you are not having a 21st century agenda and you're yet looking at the rear view mirror and spending 80% of your time giving yourself a pat on the back of how well you performed in the last quarter and the last month, I'm telling you, the board is wasting its time. The board should be looking at the future and advising how to move quickly to 21st century. Lastly, the last category and last criteria of a 21st century leader. You will be a leader who has an urgency to impact the climate emergency. You will not be a leader who says, I will sort this out in 2040, 2050, 2060. You will now realize, if you appreciate science, that the cutoff year is 2025 as per WMO and IPCC. Even IPCC is beginning to compromise and say, you have time. We don't have time. We have not had time. And the recent discussions I've seen is about achieving this in 2050. I can tell you, any leader on the planet who talks about achieving these things in 2030, beyond 2025, I can tell you is an 18th, 19th century leader who does not respect science, who has not put people and planet before profit, and who has not embedded the 21st century leadership model. I have given you an images of leaders who are 21st century leaders. Elon Musk of Tesla, SolarCity, SpaceX. Patagonia's Yvon Chouinard, the gentleman who turned the biggest oil company in Denmark, which is the Danish oil and gas company, to a 100% renewable energy company today in between 2009 and today. He went in there and said, we have to be part of the solution. Closed down renewable fossil fuels. Danish oil and gas became Ørsted, and the gentleman, Henrik Poulsen, the gentleman in the middle there, is the man who did that. The lady, Jacinda Ardern, she closed down the country when there was one person with an infection. What do you think of managing the health emergency with urgency? Why is New Zealand considered the best management of the COVID virus crisis? Because it had leaders who respected science and did what I told you. Sundar Pichai of Google, and I work very closely with Google in our course in Ireland and London, and in Luxembourg, we have Google's head of energy transition on our lecture panel, and very clearly a company that is committed to the future and not wanting to. Do you know Google is 100% renewable energy driven today? Do you know Microsoft and Amazon are 100% renewable energy driven today? So the biggest companies on the planet have already achieved that. So don't talk about, how can we do that? I have already told you two examples in Sri Lanka. The guy next to that is the head of EIB Bank. And the EIB Bank, which I recently wrote a case study for INSEAD Business School and published in June, banned investment in fossil fuels starting 2021. The biggest multilateral lending institution of the world has bombed out and said no more fossil fuel investment. They disbursed 88 billion euros per annum. 88 billion euros. I had the good fortune of working with this team in Europe, and I can tell you that the case study was influential in making them do that decision. And I'll send this case study to Professor Lakshman and his team. He can share it with all of you to show you what 21st century leadership can do. And not only that, we have a gentleman from this company on our panel when we teach this course in Europe. Next to that is the head of the European Union. Her name is Ursula von der Leyen. She created what we now call the European Green Deal. The European Green Deal, ladies and gentlemen, is going to impact every single item Sri Lanka hopes to export to Europe. And this Green Deal, we need to understand, insists that anything exported to Europe in the future needs to be sustainably sourced and sustainably made. So if you don't have renewable energy, I don't know how you're going to be making anything sustainable. So the European Green Deal, led by Ursula von der Leyen, new head of the European Union. And last but not least is Anne Botin, head of Santander Bank. And I have selected 3 financial institutions because financial institutions sometimes become the biggest culprit in creating climate emergencies because they keep funding the fossil fuel industry. Now, here are examples of banks who have completely stopped this, and the world's biggest multilateral bank, EIB, is bigger than IMF and World Bank combined. That's how big they are. That's the influence they have. So remember, influencing this can be done. All you need is a 21st century leader, and every single one of those people I have mentioned there are appreciator of science. Elon Musk is a PhD in physics, by the way. But you don't have to be a PhD in physics to appreciate science. If you did grade 8 science, that's enough to appreciate science, right? You don't need to be a scientist. You just need to have a mind which says, I'm not going to deny it. All of these guys and girls, ladies I have mentioned, are people who put people and planet before profit. They have embedded the 21st century board leadership model. And every one of them have an urgency to impact the planet. Why would they be banning fossil fuels in 2020? Why should they do that? But I can tell you there are banks who continue to invest in fossil fuels. And I'll give you 3 banks. The 5 banks which are doing that today and this week were caught out and published in the global financial media. Number 1, JP Morgan. Number 2, Bank of America. Number 3, Citibank. Number 4, Barclays Bank. Number 5, HSBC. Number 6, Standard Chartered. All these banks were caught out because they were funding one of the biggest coal power projects in the world. So even today, we have leaders who are compromising the planet, who obviously, probably these very rich people have bought a ticket on Virgin Atlantic to escape planet Earth and be on another planet when this planet is destroyed and completely compromised in 2025. So with that, I'm going to end my presentation and hand you back to Professor Vatawala and team. And I want to once again reiterate, be a 21st century leader. Don't continue to be an 18th and 19th century leader. If you have any interest of a planet with people, a planet that is inhabitable, and a planet that you can do business in. No planet no business. No people, no business. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hi, Jayanta. Good to see you. Jayanpati.
Hello.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you very much, Dr. Ravi. Maybe we can, if you can take the report, the presentation out of the share screen, that will be good. So,
Sure,
Dr. Ravi, may I now? Actually, I am indeed. I should maybe congratulate you on this excellent presentation, which gave a deep message to the corporate sector. I think it's not only the corporate sector, but also the government sector and all those who are really involved in the managing of the resources that you mentioned. Now, one of the things that I want to just to tell you is that as far as the CMA Sri Lanka is concerned, a great thing that we have taken is, of course, the CMA Excellence in Integrated Reporting Awards, because that is an area where we look not only at the financial part, but the non-financial areas. Now, you were really today talking to the business sector about the non-financial impact of the non-financial goals that you were talking of. I think that was really a very, very incredible journey that you went through, gave a good message, and of course, finally, where they should now be at the 21st century leader. So I think it was a very, very great lesson to everyone, and the importance that has to be done. I just want to tell you one thing that I saw recently in the newspaper, that of course, also on this fossil fuel that you are talking of. I think I'm sure Jayanpati will be able to maybe speak much more on that later, but where the president stopped the third coal power plant and wanted to go for renewable energy. So I think that was
I'm very happy to see that.
Yeah, so that's a very, very great achievement on our part, but we need to do many more, because like the forest cover that you're talking, so a lot of things have to be done. So I don't want to speak too much, but I think you gave a really first hand maybe information and also knowledge to everyone where we are heading. You know, we will all be destroying ourselves if we really don't look at the sustainability development goals. So I'm very indeed thankful to you. As I said, there are three panelists that I have that we have invited. We have Mr. Jayanpati Molligoda, who's the chairman of the Sri Lanka Tea Board. Then we have Dr. Nuwan Gunaratna, a senior lecturer at the University of Sri Jayawardhanapura, and Mr. Nishanta Hevavitarana, who will represent in the Colombo Stock Exchange. You know, they have all the corporate companies, so I'm sure that they will be able to give some comments and also to ask some questions to you. So firstly, may I ask Mr. Jayanpati Molligoda maybe to give his comments and any questions that you have for Dr. Ravi.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Professor Wattavala, and all the other council members. The CMA members are listening to this presentation. If I may be permitted to borrow one of his first statement mentioned by Dr. Ravi, the extreme weather and the climate action failure, and also his proven hypothesis that this climate action failure is mainly due to the inaction or the things that we have committed. It's a failure on the part of the national leaders and the corporate leaders. So I was wondering, when he mentioned about the extreme weather and climate action failure, what has that got to do with the business strategy? So as CMA members, they must be asking. But at the end of his presentation, we all are convinced that this has direct connection, and he has articulated out of 17 sustainable development goals, the 5 goals directly impact the business strategy and the business profitability. And also he mentioned about the profit before planet and people. This reminds me about 1.5 years back when this coronavirus thing came into Sri Lanka. I was invited to attend this task force meeting first, and I came back, and my son, a little bit of eccentric case, 18 years, he said, this is the way of, this is one of the ways of punishing the human being for destroying the biodiversity
Absolutely.
on the planet. So we were laughing at him and said, don't say like that. And he said, you mark my words, it will be a disaster. After 1.5 years, we realized, and myself and my wife, we were talking without telling him. See, he mentioned this one of the ways of punishing human being for destroying the thing. So I think I take this opportunity to pay glowing tribute to Dr. Ravi, not only because of his excellent presentation, his involvement in this area. I know personally, I have with me, when Professor Lakshman mentioned this morning, I just concluded my Banker Ceylon board meeting and I managed to come back, and this is the document prepared by Colombo Tea Traders Association under the title Ceylon Tea Roadmap 2030. He was involved with the preparation. There were 5 subcommittees, and if I may be permitted to mention very quickly the industry objectives that we all have agreed under the able leadership of Dr. Ravi and the other CTTA members, and we also put in some inputs. The Ceylon, this is about the Ceylon tea and the tea industry. I will talk about that. Stemming from his presentation, Ceylon becomes a geographical origin of choice in the world of tea. He mentioned about the technology and innovation widely applied to assure quality, enhance productivity, and build diversity. And then also the growers, manufacturers, and value adders combine to deliver a pure, healthy beverage that is environmentally and ethically sustainable. The last but not the least, the earnings from the industry are distributed fairly and equitably among shareholders. So we, to the letter and spirit, the industry stakeholders, we are following this, but unfortunately, there had been some disconnects, and I will explain that. I think Dr. Ravi mentioned about that, but I like how he have taken this responsible consumption and production. And
maybe you have to keep it short because we have two others. Okay.
Sure. And the affordable clean energy. So I will very briefly explain, based on Ravi's presentation, how the industry, especially the regional plantation companies, under the guidance of strategic business plan, able to use this affordability and clean energy. We have allocated 200 million rupees for the factory solar power projects. And also, we have been able to articulate this the organic agricultural inputs. We are not going towards organic, as you know. This is not an organic farming or organic tea manufacture marketing, but it is just to minimize the excessive use of fossil fuel, excessive use of chemicals, excessive use of agrochemicals, because we have seen a gradual decline in the production over a period of 30 years in the tea production and the quality, because the plant microbes are disturbed with the excessive use. So with that, I will thank Dr. Ravi Fernando for the excellent presentation. Now we are all convinced the importance of maintaining or developing these goals in our strategic business plans. As accountants, I think I'm sure you will pay more attention, rather than having profits before planet and people. Let us concentrate on the planet, the environmental sustainability and the social well-being, so that automatically the sustainable profitability will come in. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you, Jayanta. Thank you very much. If I can respond to Mr. Jayanta, Professor Lakshman, I have seen amazing amount of changes in how we are approaching the tea sector in Sri Lanka, and I as he rightly pointed out, I've been driving the 2030 strategy with Anil Cook, and I think Mr. Jampati will remember when we launched this 2030 strategy, I think it was in the Shangri-La Hotel, so 3 to 5 years ago. I was talking about exactly what I talked about today. And I think I have not changed my message. I have been consistent. But one thing I want to reassure you, Jayanta, is on the boards I sit on, I have made sure one of them is a tea plantation company. And I'm proud to say we are the first tea plantation company to get to 130% renewable energy driven, because I got we drove this in the last 3 years and got to all 14 plantations to do this. And we will be nearing 200% renewable energy driven by December or March next year. So the reason I'm sharing this with Mr. Jampati is, if any tea plantation company comes to you and says this can't be done, then all it's telling you and me is the people leading it are 18th century leaders.
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr.
Thank
Ravi.
you.
Thank you, Jampati. Jampati is a founder, member, and also a fellow of the Certified Management Accountant of Sri Lanka. So we are very thankful to him for his remarks and the good comments he has made. So can I now invite Dr. Nuan? Maybe we need to keep it short, Nuan. Okay.
Unmute.
Yes, yeah. Thank you, Dr. Ravi, for your interesting presentation as well. So as Professor Lakshman Vatawala mentioned, I'll be very brief on this. And yeah, let me make 2 comments. One is that 2 points here. One is that the Responsible Business Trends report issued by the Responsible Corporation in 2019 identified that there is an increasing trend for the companies to embrace sustainable development goals into their business strategies. And the report further says that there are, nearly 80% of the companies who are either planning or in the process of doing this. But the report highlights that only 30% of the companies have done this to a great extent. So that it shows that there is a long way for the companies to go in embracing or integrating SDGs into their business strategies. And the research highlights, or the reports highlight, some of the challenges in integrating SDGs into the business strategies. There are so many, but I'll be very brief. One is that educating suppliers and integrating the value chain partners. Second is that how to create tangible goals and align SDGs with business KPIs, and also how to balance short-term cash flow focus with SDGs. And finally, we have winning top management support and the lack of clear guidance and standards in doing so. So these are some of the pertinent challenges in embracing SDGs into business strategy. Now, to address the last one, that is lack of clear guidance, that GRI and UN Global Compact and also World Business Council for Sustainable Development Goal, these 3 organizations develop SDG Compass, which is freely available on internet. So I invite all the members or all the participants to search SDG Compass so that you will find more details on how to embrace or how to integrate sustainable SDGs into business strategies. Now, to be very specific, this report highlights 5 steps of integrating SDGs into their business strategies. Number 1 is understanding SDGs. Number 2, defining priorities. As you mentioned, for different organizations, different SDGs will be important. Number 3 is setting goals. Number 4 is the integration. That's the most important part. And finally, for the accountants, this will be very important, how to report and communicate. So as you mentioned, for these priority SDGs, let me also highlight what are the tools that the accountants have, so that it will be more palatable for the accounting fraternity that is here. Now, firstly, you mentioned about SDG 7, that is affordable and clean energy. Now, that is where we have, as accountants, we have energy accounting. Now, for SDG 15, life on land, so we have biodiversity accounting. Then SDG 6, clean water, so we have water accounting. So SDG 12, responsible consumption and production. So we have material flow cost accounting and so many other accounting tools. So what is important is that as accountants, we have a lot of tools, and what is important is for the members is to gain this understanding and to overcome the organizational challenges in embracing SDGs. So with that, with the remarks, I will I will wind up. Thank you.
Thank you very
Can I
much.
respond to that, Professor Lakshman?
Yeah, okay, fine.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Nuwan. In fact, I listened to you the other day, and as you know, that I'm engaged with you because I know you're someone who can make a good contribution to Sri Lanka and the world. The real issue that I'm seeing in a lot of companies is due to the lack of 21st century leadership at the top level, at the board level, or sometimes the CEO level, then even the younger, more interested people who want to do something on sustainability are blocked because there's so much of resistance from the senior level. So I think one of the key things that have to happen is I think there is no shortage of tools, there's no shortage of science, there's no shortage of reports. I think all we now have is a shortage of 21st century leaders. So I would really urge CMA to even start looking at how those 4 issues are measured amongst your senior members who are directors, who are holding high positions. Because if you can track every one of your senior middle-level leaders on those 4 parameters I talked about, you will already know who you have to change from 18th century leadership to 21st century. So thanks, Dr. Nuwan. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Ravi. We will follow up on that and maybe get your advice also. May I now invite Mr. Nishanta Hevavitarna, who is representing the Colombo Stock Exchange, because I know that they have taken a lot of action, maybe to give any comments and any suggestions or questions he has.
Thank you, Professor. And thank you, Dr. Ravi Fernando, for the excellent presentation. And it's very important to have the prioritizing. Of course, as a stock exchange is better place to do so many things in this regard, because we are better place among the listed companies. Having understood this importance, Colombo Stock Exchange became a member of the Sustainability Stock Exchange Initiative in 2015, whereby we publicly committed promoting sustainability among listed companies. And having been a member of SSC, of course, we started doing so many things in that regard, and we issued a voluntary guidelines for the companies to follow. Of course, it is not practical and not easy to make the reporting mandatory at the very beginning itself. Of course, in terms of ESG, we have made the governance component mandatory. However, we have not yet made mandatory the other 2 components. But one day we will, like India did. Of course, India first they went on voluntary basis, then thereafter they made it mandatory for the largest 500 companies. Then, of course, last year they extended that to largest 1,000 companies likewise. And so in terms of one other thing that we can do is perhaps the best way to showcase the companies who are doing in terms of ESG is to compile a sort of index that is very, the popular tool in this regard. Of course, if we can compile the ESG index, of course, without being serious about ESG or sustainability, no company would be able to become a index constituent of such. Why that matters is, of course, there is a huge demand from the investors as well. If you think of, for example, the members of UNPRI signatories, right? All asset managers, and they are, I think, close to 3,000 asset managers. Their total asset under management comes around close to 100 trillion US dollars. You can imagine how the pressure and demand that is particularly coming from the institutional investors. All right, with that, thank you very much once again. And I would like to pose a short question to you, Dr. Fernando. And in your opinion, what do you think in terms of shaping strategies, what can the corporate managers do in terms of goal 15 and 6?
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Nishanta Hevavitarna. I really appreciate your comments. Actually, the UN Global Compact in Sri Lanka was set up by me in 2007. I launched the UN Global Compact, and by 2010, I had already made a proposal to the UN Global Compact to launch a sustainable index stock exchange. And actually, that's what they did. They took our advice and they went and launched this. So I'm glad to hear that we are now part of that index, which we started mooting in Copenhagen in 2010. So I'm glad to see that. Now, the question you asked was a very important one. And I want to try and give an idea to both you and Mr. Vattarwala, and also to Jampati, because you all are able to probably influence this much faster. Number one is, I think there should be maybe an award scheme where you look for 21st century leadership in the companies of Sri Lanka. Because the danger is that if Sri Lanka is led by 18th and 19th century leaders, then Sri Lanka is going to suffer in a big way. Why? Because number one, they will deny science. And when they deny science, everything else is no use. So I would suggest, whether CMA and the stock exchange can come up with some award scheme where every year there is the 21st Century Leadership Award by category to be considered. So to Mr. Bandara, Mr. Ruchira, and all of you who are in the committee, why not create a 21st century board leadership or a leadership award scheme, which is the annual CMA Stock Exchange Joint Award. So that is one idea. Number two is also to look at accelerating, bringing the mandatory goals, Mr. Banda Hevavitan. I think that's important, because I can see if people don't make goal number 7, renewable energy, a mandatory reporting item, they will take their own time on when they move to renewables, and it will be too late for Sri Lanka, because we will basically have got completely wiped out due to fossil fuels. So now the president is clear. You all can take that as the cue and say any company who is moving towards the 2030 70% model can be rewarded, right? So that could be a goal that you can build in using the president's vision. Third and final, your question is about goal number 15 and 6. How can companies benefit by this? So the recommendation I have, Mr. Nishanta, is basically every company, depending on its size, can be asked to adopt or conserve a certain amount of land, which is a current forest. Because what is happening is even the current forests are getting wiped out so fast that we are going to be losing all our forest cover in the next 10 years if we don't look sharp, because we are 16% and the knocking down 1.2 to 1.5% every year. So as opposed to knocking down forests, what if the stock exchange and CMA get together and say, we want you to adopt a forest in Sri Lanka and we will give you a tax break. And I can tell you, I have already spoken to the Inland Revenue Department, because I recently taught 40 of their students in PIMA for the MBA in taxation. And I got them to do an exercise, which was how they were going to give tax breaks for companies who are reforesting and conserving, and how to give tax breaks to companies who are going to renewable energy. So I have already done the spade work on the leaders of Sri Lanka with a course. But this is how one thing is conservation adoption strategy. Then if they are reforesting, if they take a destroyed forest and say, we are going to reforest this, and we are going to do this as our company's contribution to reducing the climate emergency, that is probably another thing. So how do we get every company listed in the stock exchange to adopt and conserve a current forest or reforest the destroyed forest? Because if all companies in Sri Lanka listed in the stock exchange do that, then there is hope for holding the figure 16 and going up, as opposed to seeing the figure 16 go down. So these are my ideas for Professor Lakshman. Think about a CMA stock exchange, 21st century leadership award. Think about strategies to link the Inland Revenue Department and the Tax Department and stock exchange to recognize the companies driving for goal 7 and going for renewables and giving them an annual award, and for companies who are basically increasing their forest cover, or they don't have to be in any product that is to do with the forest, but they have done something for Sri Lanka. Because at the end of the day, no forest means Sri Lanka will be out of water. I mean, we don't want to be the next Dubai, right? So let's think about, these are my humble ideas, but I must say it's easy to give ideas. Making it happen is another thing. But I can tell you some of these ideas I've given in Luxembourg, and they have adopted that already. And in Ireland, they are now discussing how to do this. So maybe there's some truth in what I'm saying.
Thank you, Dr. Fernando. Thank you, Dr. Fernando. Deeply insightful. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Ravi. I think you have made some very, very valuable suggestions, which we will take forward, because we are really people who are maybe involved in taking things forward, and with your support, and also with the Colombo Stock Exchange, and also our other council members who are present here, the Vice President and others, I'm sure we can work on that. We have received a few questions. I don't think we can take everything. Can I just read one question, Dr. Ravi?
Professor Lakshman, I'm happy to answer all the questions. I'm ready to give the time. Because if you all are ready, I'm ready to answer the questions.
Our time is over, so we'll do one question.
I know. Okay, please ask.
Anjani Vaidyaratna. Really appreciate the ability and need for private sector and state need to prioritize on the goals 7, 15, 6, 12, and 9. Will be grateful if you could also give some countries that are doing a good job in this, where they are parallelly addressing the first 5 goals.
Okay, so I think the question is more to do with the first 5 goals, which are to do with poverty and food security and hunger. You see, at the end of the day, for poverty, there have to be people. For hunger, there have to be people. If the people get all wiped out, then we don't have a solution to that. So I always put people first. Let's protect the people. Let's protect the land, right? So the countries that are in terms of UNSDGs, which are doing, let me start by the countries which are doing well in the goals that I mentioned, because I consider that to be the priority first. So if I look at the 5 goals I mentioned, the Scandinavian countries have virtually all achieved all 5 of the goals I have mentioned. They have achieved them not in 2030, they have achieved them in 2022, 2021. Right? Then, when I look at some of the Latin American countries, I talked about Uruguay, Paraguay, Ecuador, Costa Rica. They have all achieved these numbers. I mean, these are not countries which are oil-rich and have massive resources to do things. Some of them are even poorer than us. What they have is leaders who say, let's save the planet. Let's get our country sorted out. That is all we need. We need people who understand the reality of the situation and not simply think about how do we make another quarter's profit. What's the point of making the next 3 quarters profit and closing your company down because there is no business in the next 3 years? I think it's much better to have no profits the next 1 or 2 quarters or 1 year and getting everything right so that you have a business and people for the future. So I think this is my answer. In terms of the Scandinavian countries, even goal 1 to 5, these are the countries doing well.
Thank you, Dr. Ravi. Before I invite Mr. Hennayak, I just want to make a small announcement. That is really where the International Federation Accountants and the accounting profession has taken the leadership to bring these sustainability development goals into place. That is, the International Integrated Reporting Council and the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board announced in June this year, 2021, that they have merged into a unified organization called the Value Reporting Foundation. Okay. So today, with this coming in, we will have the integrated reporting, which has been going separately, and the sustainability development goals going separately. Now these two have now got together, and I'm sure that this will really take forward the what we are discussing about the sustainability development goals and the integrated reporting. As I mentioned to you, it's not only the financial, but also the non-financial aspects. So the sustainability area would definitely fit into it. And this is one area that the Value Foundation, Reporting Foundation will be taking forward. So with those remarks, I will invite our Vice President and Vice President of the South Asian Federation of Accountants, Mr. Hennayaka Bandara, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Can I just make one comment, Professor Lakshman, about what comment you made about reporting? Now, in my charts, I presented how most countries are 70% of the target of the UNSDGs as at 2020. You know why that is? Because all these countries are thinking about reporting. They are thinking about reports. They are thinking about ticking the box reports for the 17 goals. You know, 21st century leaders don't tick in the box. They make things happen. So one of the reasons that Sri Lanka and companies in the world, and I'm not having any go at Sri Lankan leaders, I'm telling you, forget the reporting, because the bottom line is 21st century leaders will act very dramatically and fast with urgency, because they know time has run out. This is not about time going to run out in 2030 or 2040. Time has run out, and every news bulletin is confirming that. So what I want to really urge every one of you members of this CMA Council and leaders of Sri Lanka's business world is to say, for now, the time has come to forget about trying to do 17 things to save the planet. Start doing the 3 or 4 things that are going to save the planet. Get into renewables. Start looking at the green cover. Because if we don't do those 2 things and report on those 2 things, doing all the other 17 things is not going to save us. And the fact that we are 70% of the target of what we should have been in 2020, I mean, to me, that confirms the world is full of people who want to report on 17 goals and basically are saying yes, no, 3 bags full and not achieving anything. So I'm saying the time has come to refocus 5 goals, report on the 5 goals, measure on the 5 goals, attack the 5 goals. 2025 is cutoff point. And if any leader walks to you or speaks to you and says, we are hoping to do this in 2040, 2050, please show them the door out, because basically what they are telling you is I'm a 19th century leader. 2025 is cut off. Worst case, 2030. If anyone wants to do anything for the planet, they've got to do it between now and 2025. If they have ideas of trying to do this thing after that, and if you look at the big corporate giants in the banking world, they're all talking about doing things in 2040, 2050. I just read a report from Coca-Cola which says they are hoping to exit single-use plastics, reduce it by 50% in 2050. In 2050, there'll be enough plastics in the ocean. We can probably have a bridge from Sri Lanka to Europe walking on plastic. Like somebody walked on the water, we can all walk on plastic. That is the kind of unbelievable, compromised, foolish leadership we have in the world today. And we also suddenly get caught up in this. So please, reporting is good. Doing is more important than reporting. Get everyone to do the things that matter. And let's give Sri Lanka a chance to survive. And I think that we have, for the first time, a president who understands science. Otherwise, he won't be saying, move to renewable energy. He won't be saying, move to organic products. We at least have that. Now, let's make sure that everyone in the business community supports that and moves in that direction. And the stock exchange and the T-board and the CMA all become partners to achieve that, not wait for, the word reporting. I'm sorry, Professor, I'm not trying to upset you or anyone. I know reporting is very important and all that. And financial reporting quarterly is all. But I'm saying start getting them to report on the progress of the 3-4 things that will save the planet. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, actually, reporting is on the progress, so I don't want to speak in depth, but let me invite Mr. Hennaka Pandaran.
Okay, sorry, Mr. Henanaka.
No problem. So thank you, Professor, and our valued speaker and panelists, ladies and gentlemen, good evening to all of you. Since the launch of the UN Sustainable Development Goals in December 2015, corporates have been trying to do the right thing by attempting to engage with all 17 goals to the extent possible and where applicable. In fact, certain corporates have achieved their objectives by implementing right strategies and contributed to the society at large. With that note, on behalf of CMA, I'm glad to propose this vote of thanks after a very successful seminar and the discussion conducted by Dr. Ravi Fernando. As mentioned by our president in his welcome speech, Dr. Ravi Fernando is not a stranger to CMA. He has become a regular speaker in our CPD programs as well as conferences. In fact, he addressed our students of not only the CMA students, even the students in the Rafa region a couple of days ago on the same subject to a certain extent. First, I would like to thank Dr. Ravi Fernando, Chairman, CEO, Global Strategic Corporate Sustainability Private Limited, for your insightful and technical presentation and sharing your experiences to educate us on embedding priority UN Sustainable Development Goals in corporate strategy. I'm sure that the guidance provided and the technical matters highlighted by him in respect of 5 specific goals will assist all of you to enhance your knowledge and implement in your workplace. I'm sure they will be able to really understand very well, and they know what would be their responsibilities as well. Let me also thank our panelists, Dr. Nuwan Gururatne and Mr. Jayampati Malligoda and Mr. Nishant Hevavitana for your valuable contribution and sharing experiences. As mentioned by our Professor Vatavala, our President, I think Nuwan and Mr. Malligoda are the members of our own institute, and they have been helping us a lot in the past as well as the last couple of years. Let me also thank our President, Professor Lakshman Vatavala, for organizing this seminar under the CPD program to improve the knowledge of our members and others. Finally, I would like to thank our council members, Mr. Manil Jayasinghe, Mr. Ruchira Perera, Mr. Jayasekara, and also Professor Harendra, members of the Institute and others for your participation in the CMA team for the support extended to conduct this event. Thank you very much. Take care, stay safe. Good night to all of you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Hennaka. Dr. Ravi, there are some very, very appreciative comments that have been sent. So maybe we will send it to you, send on our chat where they have, I think, greatly given very good remarks on the awakening that we have given to the private sector or the corporate sector. But I think it's also not only them, but also the public sector that is really involved, and they have to cooperate with us and then do this. And I'm also sure that with what you said, if we can take this forward, because maybe it's maybe a seminar that we have had, but as you say, we need to take it forward. So maybe I'm sure that we can work with you and see how we can get this many other things implemented, and also where good things are done, where we are able to maybe focus on them and say that these are in the SDGs and they have been implemented, which is also another very good thing that we should appreciate and do. So once again, let me thank Dr. Ravi, all our other distinguished panelists who are here, Dr. Nuwan, Nishanta, and all those Mr. Jayampati Malligoda, our Vice President, Mr. Hennaka, and also all our council members and the participants for their, I'm sure that they would have gained quite a lot. And as Dr. Ravi mentioned, that they should have taken some notes and maybe go and implement or maybe advise their seniors or their organizations as to what could be done. So thank you very much, Dr. Ravi, and we wish you all the best. And we look forward to having a very, very close relationship with you in order that we can take forward all these matters that you mentioned, because you mentioned about walk the talk, you know, so that if you are going to do that, we need your support and cooperation and of course assistance. Thank you very much and good night.
You have my support, Professor, and I'm very proud to say I'm Sri Lankan. And I want to say that my heart is always to do the best I can for Sri Lanka without any rewards. I have never asked for any rewards in Sri Lanka because my global footprint is giving me the rewards I need. But I would really like to help whatever organization, especially CMA or the stock exchange or T-board. I mean, people have to just call me, and Jayanta, I don't send them an invoice and say, okay, this is going to be my fee now for the next 3 hours. But I honestly think that Sri Lanka is a beautiful nation. It's so beautifully placed. We have basically compromised our amazing environment. And we have to now really take our hearts and minds to protecting it and making Sri Lanka a sustainable nation. And the only way we are going to do that is by doing what you said you will do. So you have my fullest support. I think I'll be here till about February, at which time I will begin to move out for my teaching. But whatever I can do, all of you have my full support. And I don't think any of you all have had an invoice so far in terms of these sessions.
Thank
Okay.
you, thank you. We are
Thank
very
you so much.
grateful for your generosity, so that's very well accepted by everyone. So we like to hear more of these seminars and maybe other sessions on the 21st century leadership. I'm sure will be our next seminar. So I do hope that you will agree now itself to conduct that.
Thank you very
much. Thank you. Thanks everyone. Okay. Bye.
Thank you,
Night.
Doctor. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.
Doctor.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Rosa.
Mr. Mali.
Night.
Thank you.
Good
night.
Everyone.
Dr. Nuwan, thank you. Thank you, Jay.
Right.
Thank you, Dr.
Okay.
Nuwan. Thank you,
Thank you.
Rosa. Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Thank you,
Thank
Dasgupta.
Noam. Thank you, Professor.
Thanks, Jai.
Good.
Thank you. Then. Okay, so we
Bye.
close up now. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you,
Okay.
Jampati. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank
Thanks
you.
for coming. Okay, we can end up. Okay.